Hello, I'm Laurel Wingfield, and I'm back with an abridged version of Chapter 7 of my book, Alice and the Best Friends Forever, Book 1, Jane's Secret. I'll begin reading now. "Just what do you think you were doing?" Mr. Tyson demanded, glaring at Leo's gang, who were standing in a row in the headmaster's office in front of his desk. Mr. Wysack and Mr. Singer were standing by the door. Leo was not there. He was still in the boys' toilets, trying to wash urine out of his trousers, watched by a teaching assistant. A spare pair of trousers from lost property had been lent to him. The boys were all looking at the carpet, not so sure of themselves anymore. They shifted their feet uncomfortably. "Well, I'm waiting for an answer," Mr. Tyson snapped. "Terry, have you nothing to say for yourself?" "No, sir," Dermot muttered at the carpet. "No, sir," Mr. Tyson mimicked. "You, all of you, hardly ever turn up for school, and when you do, you act like a pack of wild dogs attacking a small child. You are completely out of control. You have been in detention more times than I can remember, and you've been suspended more than once. Boys, this is where you prepare for the future in school. What sort of a future do you think you're going to have if you keep behaving like this?" The boys had heard it all before. They didn't want to hear it again. Suddenly, Brian had the urge to giggle and snorted. He put his hand over his face, trying to stifle it. This triggered off the others, who all started to laugh. "This is not funny!" Mr. Tyson shouted, standing up quickly behind his desk. "This is not a joke! Stop that at once!" Mr. Wysack and Mr. Singer looked embarrassed and uncomfortable. The boys laughed harder, bent over with mirth. In the background, Mr. Tyson continued to shout at them. They stopped only when he said, "The longer this goes on, the longer we're all going to be stuck here. I'll be calling all of your parents, of course, to inform them of this matter." That sobered them up. They went back to regarding the carpet, biting their lips to stop themselves from laughing out loud again. The headmaster, ranting at them from behind his desk, reminded them of a barking dog. "Well, you still haven't answered my question," Mr. Tyson continued. "What sort of a future do you think you're going to have if you carry on like this?" What he was saying meant nothing to the boys. They hated him as much as they hated any authority figure. Dermot had to fight the urge to imitate a barking dog and start the boys laughing again. He had to fight to keep a straight face. Mr. Tyson was right about one thing. The longer they mucked about, the longer they would be stuck there. When no answer was forthcoming, Mr. Tyson added, "You're all heading for criminal careers and prison, that's what. You think anyone's going to want to give you a job with reputations like yours? What do you think you're going to do with your lives? Spend the whole of your working lives on benefits? It doesn't work like that. You won't be allowed to get away with that. You'll be forced to train in some sort of work and get a job, whether you want one or not. You can't go on like this, and you cannot be allowed to continue to behave like this. We do not tolerate bullying in this school. How do you think your victims feel when you gang up on them? Do you have any idea what effect it has on them? Do you have any idea of the damage you're causing? You have no regard at all for the feelings of other people. That poor girl was nothing but sport to you. Bullying damages its victims for the rest of their lives. Children have committed suicide rather than face any more bullying." Finally, there was a grudging, whining response from Dermot, who had to fight to keep the mirth out of his voice, as well as off his face. "It was Leo Harris, sir. He made us do it." "That's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard in my life," Mr. Tyson snapped. "Leo Harris didn't make you do anything you didn't already want to do yourselves." He sighed, then added, "You're all on 1 hour of detention every night for the next 7 school days, starting from tonight. I doubt if it'll have any effect on you, however. Now get out of my sight!" The boys turned and filed out through the door, which Mr. Wysack had opened for them. They fled, gratefully. Once outside in the corridor, they let the laughter come, running through the corridors in the general direction of the playground. Finally, when they had sobered up again, Brian said, "We're not turning up for detention, are we?" Dermot snorted, derisively. "Of course not. We're going to have some fun instead." This piqued the interest of the other boys. "Are we going to get some drink?" Joel asked. "Sounds good," Brian said. "But what are we going to pay for it with? You got that money you took from that cow Alison?" Dermot looked puzzled for a moment, then searched his pockets. He couldn't find the money anywhere. "I must have dropped it," he admitted. The other boys groaned. "We'll have to get some more," Brian said. "We can get some off one of the other kids on the way home," Joel suggested. "Yeah, we can watch out for someone on their own," Dermot decided, and felt better. They crossed the playground quickly, expecting the other kids to move out of their way. With the reputation they had, the other children did. Dermot and his gang were heading towards the main entrance before the bell went, and the other kids began to re-enter the corridors, sorting themselves into various classrooms. As the crowds in the playground thinned, Dermot's gang would begin to feel uncomfortably conspicuous. "Let's get out of here," Dermot said. "I can't remember what lesson we're supposed to be in next anyway." "Yeah, let's go shopping," Nathan said. He had learned that it was a joke among the members of Dermot's gang. It meant, let's go shoplifting. So they rounded the school buildings and headed towards the main gate, walking along the main entryway between the school buildings and the playing field. As well as the playground, there were groups of children dotted all over the grass of the playing field, right up to the long chain-link fence on the far side. "Can you believe it? Leo wetting himself like that," Philip said, and they all laughed again. "I wonder if he wets the bed at home." On the way out of the school, they shoved at each other playfully, talking about Leo and laughing. They made it out of the gate before the bell rang for afternoon lessons. From his office, Mr. Tyson watched them go. He had not been surprised to see them leave. Behind him, Mr. Wysack and Mr. Singer were about to go to the next classes. Before he left, Mr. Wysack said, "I doubt if they'll turn up for detention. Jake Brewer and Andrew Adams are the heads of their tutor groups. They're the ones who have to wait for them to turn up." Alan Tyson sighed. "Good luck to them," he said. "That Jane Archer has a lot of guts and a lot of initiative, persuading the others to go and help Alison more like that," Erno Wysack continued. "She has the makings of a leader, that one. She's bright enough to go to university one day." "Something odd about that one, though," Frank Singer added. "You get the feeling that she's far brighter than the lot of us. That she's holding back. She could have gone to a specialist school for gifted children if she wanted." "That's not what her scores say," Alan Tyson pointed out. "They're better than average, but not enough to make her stand out." "I agree with Frank," Erno Wysack said. "She's holding back. It's as if she doesn't want to stand out." "And why would she do that?" Alan Tyson asked, sharply. He was still angry about the way the boys had behaved. When he was in one of his moods, he became cynical and sarcastic. The three men looked at each other. It was a question none of them could answer. Erno Wysack broke the tension by looking at his watch. "I'd better get to class," he said. Frank Singer nodded. "Bell will be going in a minute," he agreed. "See you later." The two teachers left, Frank Singer closing the door behind them. Alan Tyson waited until Dermot and his gang had left through the front entrance before he went back to his desk, sat down, and picked up the phone. He made an internal call, speaking to his secretary, Mrs. Elton. The bell for after-dinner lessons rang as he began to speak. While he was dictating to her the letter he wanted to send to the boys' parents, he was interrupted by a teaching assistant, Mrs. Aubrey, bringing Leo to his office. Somehow, Leo looked smaller without his gang and his swagger. The borrowed trousers were so long on him they had to be turned up at the bottoms, or he would have been walking on them. He was carrying his school bag and his trousers in a plastic carrier bag. Alan Tyson wished he could have seen Leo with the other boys and be done with a lot of them at once. He would hand out the same punishment to Leo as he had to the others, but he didn't expect Leo to turn up for detention either. "Well, Leonard, here we are again," he sneered, once Leo was standing in front of him, examining the carpet as his cronies had done. "This time it's for bullying. What a surprise!" He could not help the sarcasm. After a pause, during which he glared at the boy in front of him, he added, "Why do you do it, Leonard? Why are you a bully? Why do you pick on the other children?" "I'm not a bully," Leo muttered, so faintly that the headmaster could barely hear him. Mrs. Aubrey shifted, sighed, rolled her eyes. Everyone knew what Leo did. What was the point of denying it? "What did you say?" Mr. Tyson demanded. "I'm not a bully," Leo muttered again. "Then what are you?" Mr. Tyson asked. His voice was harsh, brittle. Leo regarded the carpet in silence. "Is it because you have some sort of mental health problem we don't know about?" Mr. Tyson asked. It was just possible that Leo was bullying other children in a desperate and pathetic attempt to divert attention away from something that was wrong with him. "You don't go wetting yourself in front of everyone if there's nothing wrong with you." Leo looked up sharply and blurted, "It was that Jane Archer. She—" Leo paused, trying to work out how to describe it. Mr. Tyson stared at him, hard. "Jane Archer made you wet yourself?" Mr. Tyson said, in disbelief. "And how is she supposed to have done that?" Leo looked down at the carpet again. "It was something in the way she looked at me," he muttered. There was a long pause. Finally, Mr. Tyson said, "Maybe you are mentally ill. That sounds like paranoid delusion to me. Another child looking at you and making you wet yourself? Do you seriously expect anyone to believe that?" "No, sir," Leo muttered. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Mr. Tyson snapped. He had had enough today of looking at the tops of boys' heads instead of their faces. Leo looked up, reluctantly. "Whatever reason you had for wetting yourself today, what you and the others did to Alison Moore, and what you have done to other children, is inexcusable. You know what the school policy is on bullying. You've been told enough times. You play truant more often than you're here, and God knows what you get up to when you're bunking off school. Do you realise that your mother will be fined or even sent to prison because you can't make sure you turn up for school? Do you want that?" "No, sir." "I understand your mother works as a shop assistant in one of those convenience stores that's open all hours, but she has to work long hours to keep you and your brother. Who would look after you if she was sent to prison? You'll be taken into care by the social services, Leonard. She would lose her job, and where would the money to pay the bills with come from then? She would lose her home, and so would you and your brother." Leo was looking down at the carpet again. He was unable to look Mr. Tyson in the eye. "I'm putting you and the rest of your gang on detention for the next 7 days. Mr. Tyson pronounced. "A letter will be sent to your mother explaining this. You are to remain behind school for 1 hour, starting from tonight. And I will tell you the same thing that I told your cronies, for all the good it will do. If you keep up this kind of behaviour, you will end up as a career criminal and spend most of your adult life in prison. Mrs. Aubrey, please escort Leonard to his next class. I believe that for your year group it's geography this afternoon, isn't it?" Leo said nothing. Mrs. Aubrey, who was an IT teaching assistant, asked, "Which room is that, Leo?" 3C, Leo muttered. "Goodbye, Mr. Harris," Mr. Tyson said, the pitch of his voice shooting up on "bye." Mrs. Aubrey opened the office door and ushered Leo out, guiding him through the doorway with a hand on his back. Leo exited the headmaster's office with his head down and a scowl on his face and poison in his thoughts. That was the end of chapter 7 of Alice and the Best Friends Forever, Jane's Secret. I hope you enjoyed that, and you'll be back next week for Chapter 8. Until then, take care and goodbye.